Good evening, welcome to another GT3 PS5 AOR race. Too many words. Yes, round 6 of this GT3 season AOR PS5 here at Brands Hatch tonight, with changeable conditions very much possible already showing themselves in this practice session. Track been slowly drying up through the session, and will be sure to cause some interesting racing tonight. We'll wait and see what comes in qualifying and in the race, but standard British weather, never impossible to see some rain, so we'll mix things up, most likely, if we get that. 20 drivers on the grid at the moment, just 4 minutes remaining in this free practice session. And then we will go qualifying. Current championship leader after 5 rounds remains Tinnis in the house. Has been doing well for the entire season, 5 podiums out of 5, leading the championship by 21 points ahead of Jazzman, who will be looking to close that in and make it a close battle in this second half of the season. Could we see anyone else interrupt the order at the top? Very challenging circuit, Brands Hatch, easy to make a mistake, go off onto the grass. One small moment can be very detrimental to somebody's race or qualifying session, so we could very much see a mixed up order, a bit like at Bathurst last week, and rain there, rain here even, potentially just to spice things up even a little bit further. I won't be reading too much into these practice times today. As I said, the conditions have been changing throughout, so lap after lap times are improving at this point. And drivers will just be getting their eye in, general feel of the car, working out if the setup's good in dry and wet, and then they will have to deal with whatever comes next. Just a 1 hour race tonight, so it is the standard format for the season. For the 1 hour races, there is a mandatory pit stop with a mandatory tyre change. Refuelling is allowed. Could take some effect if there is any weather changes during the race. Otherwise, it will be a simple mid-race tyre change. Either full dry race or full wet race. You would expect roughly 30-minute stints from drivers, but that weather forecast will be all important. So watch Tinnis attacking the track, trying to get those bragging rights at the end of free practice. Apologies in advance if I'm not quite as talkative tonight. Not feeling 100%, so there may be a few more little gaps as I just catch my breath and don't go too over the top tonight, but I'm sure that will change when we get some very exciting on-track action, and I will simply have to just keep talking. Tinus just in behind Jazzman at the end of free practice. As we have Dennis coming round to finish his lap, and then we will jump forward to qualifying. And the real action begins.
Green light, go, go, go.
And we have rain at the beginning of qualifying, but the rain's stopping in under 10 minutes time, so qualifying will be difficult. This is going to definitely cause all the fastest laps to be late in the session. The early running will be just getting yourself warmed up, and yeah, it will be all down to those last couple of minutes with the track at its best, you would imagine. A lot of drivers still going out straight away though. Don Michelo first out on track today. We will ride on board with him for these opening laps in the wet. Very useful to have clear track in front of you in the wet conditions. The spray, quite difficult to just keep your focus on braking points and turn-in points. Track ahead of you just disappearing into a haze, so track position in this qualifying at the start definitely will be on people's minds, but also, as I said earlier, the late session is where it will get very interesting. As we have Guido Christ joining late as qualifying begins, but here comes Don Michelo to begin qualifying. Very difficult to pick your braking point in the wet for the first time. Obviously conditions different from the end of practice. Relatively clean so far without anything spectacular, and as I say that is a bit too much curb, and the car very easily gets away from you off the curb in these conditions. Don Michelo holding it together, but that will not be the ideal banker lap. So as we know, this won't be a key benchmark time, but we'll see what the first lap on the board is. No, we won't, as that moment will have been an invalidation. So Skov, the first one to set a time, 1:32.2. And that's instantly beaten by Jazzman with a 1:30.9 just further back. Skov going off at the beginning of his next lap as well. A few times starting to filter through onto the board now, all fairly academic at this point. But Jazzman clearly the class of the field at this moment, with over a second gap to the next car, as we have Scott put in a time just 0.3 behind. Obviously still raining at this point. Will be very interesting to see when the rain stops. Should only be 5 minutes or so away until that rain stops, and then the track can start to dry, but there may not be a lot of time for the conditions to improve like I initially thought. If that rain keeps falling, then the track will remain quite wet to the end of the session. See the level of spray going on here. Not really the ideal camera angle. And Bren struggling with the back end as he comes round for the end of that lap. A few quicker times coming in now. Jazzman quicker again, Tinnis close, as is Robbe. So already the time's improving as the tyres get up to temperature, up to pressure. But still the rain falling at this point, 9 minutes left to go in the session. It will be absolutely key at the end here where you are on track. Getting that last lap in with the best possible track conditions, probably very important. Trying to plan your exit from the pits for some clear track, but also, I'd say, that timing, crossing the line with less than 20 seconds left on the session timer clock, is probably what's going to give you a big advantage in this kind of qualifying session. All relatively close at the front at the moment. Half a second or so between the top 5 or 6. Even in these wet conditions, but the times will tumble, I imagine. Towards the end we will see 26s or 27s, potentially, even depending on how much the track manages to dry up. Guido Christ still in the pit lane at this point, having joined late, yet in his Mercedes, the only other driver yet to set a lap time. As the rain reduces, already light rain conditions now and soon to dry up completely. almost a wide moment for you. Looked like he kept it on track, but not that time. That is just the left-hand wheels on the white line onto the grass, and as soon as he tried to turn in, the back end steps out. Safely rejoining though, as we have Rick MotoGP with a great lap to put him up to P3 at the moment. With 6 minutes to go, these times will continue to improve. Yellow flags with the rejoining Ferrari. That will not have been very helpful for Slicker on the start of this lap, having to just take caution there. Will have lost a little bit on the exit. As we have Don Michelo and Scott both making their way into the 1 minute 29s. That is a big understeer moment off the track for Swecker, and that is next lap gone, and the rain has now stopped. Track still wet obviously and will not fully dry up in the next 5 minutes, that is for sure, but it will definitely improve as Jazzman does a 1:29.0, so once again showing that as he crosses the line he is taking several tenths, close to a second off lots of drivers. Very close on track here between Jazzman and Tinnis, so not a lot of room. As everyone winds up and prepares for the last 3 laps or so of this session. Wet tyres will still be on the cars all round. We will not reach any dry tyre running in this one. It would be, I think, beyond a gamble for someone. That would be just straight up time loss. We have, I believe, Joe Powell going wide at turn 1 in front, but as we watch Bonival on his lap here, Joe Powell well out the way. The times really tumbling now, and the critical laps coming up. That final lap will be the one the drivers need to make sure there are no mistakes. They hit their apexes, they don't clip the grass. One little moment could cost you 10 positions quite easily. Right, on board with Bonival for the second half. This lap looks clean so far. What will the time be? Just under a second to find to match Jazzman as it stands. It's a 2/10 improvement, but not enough at the moment. Bonival will be looking for more in the next 2 laps. So So who has the track position at the right time here? Tinus coming through to cross the line, will be on his final lap here, so that is not perfect. It's Scott just in front. Will he be able to do another lap? But Tinus definitely finding himself on the wrong part of the circuit. This is his final lap of the session. We have Bonival and Robbe in the pits as well. That is not where you want to be as the track gets drier and drier. Rick MotoGP to second. He will get one more lap if he has the fuel. Continue to watch Tinus as he finishes his final lap here. And we will keep an eye on Scott in front, whether he can make the line. I don't think he can. I think Scott is on his final lap as well. That's it, Mr. Moosington, the final car to make the line. Tinus hardly improves there either. Scott up to P5, but would have been hoping for more with the track conditions improving, that's for sure. Who else can pull a lap out here? We have Don Michelo coming round the final corner now. Just a few cars left to complete laps. Lots of drivers already finished. Don Michelo up to 7th. Jazzman still out on track as well, but looks like the pole position may be secured already. And Adam coming through up to P6, a massive gain for Adam at the end of the session. Who else is coming through? That was an improvement for McQuiz, but only to 15th. Bleeding Sunrise also on a lap, as he can visibly see the track drying out, the sun coming out here at Brands Hatch. Bleeding Sunrise P10, 1.5 off at the moment, and half a second gained up to P6. As we have the final car of Mr. Moosington to cross the line. Wipers still on, and nothing gained there for Mr. Moosington. So, a very interesting session and fewer lap times at the end of the session, gaining drivers massive positions there. The track never really drying out properly, just those slow time gains.
Alright, there is some rain in this session, so watch out for slippery curves.
As we have rain to begin this race as well. Medium rain getting lighter in half an hour. Could we see dry conditions at the end of this one? It will be very interesting if it is, and there is a decision to make for drivers here on the fuel load. Do they expect a transition to dry tyres? It would be risky to half fuel this one for a 30-minute stint, but equally that rain could continue to the end of the race. But what a qualifying for Rick MotoGP, following up from a podium finish at Mount Panorama and starting once again in P3. Rick really showing some form after his promotion from Tier 2 from his previous season at AOR. Any drivers hoping after that wet qualifying session that there might be a dry race for them to come back a bit through the field, they will be disappointed. We have more rain here, and it will provide a big challenge. The spray following other cars, very difficult to deal with, and whoever gets into the lead early, Jazzman will be hoping to hold that. We'll have the clear track in front. Turn 1 as well, very tricky braking zone, off the rolling start, not a long run down, but easy to misjudge and very difficult to make a clear overtake, just having to roll off the throttle and ease in on the brakes to see where you can place your car, as the weather forecast does show rain is stopping in half an hour, so midway through the race it could start to dry up. This will definitely provide some interest, and we will have to keep an eye on that, keep an eye on the strategy. Who's going to get it right and gain through that pit stop phase?
30 seconds.
We have half an hour of Brands Hatch in the wet to survive before we can ask those questions.
20 seconds.
Final few seconds of the pre-race. Drivers have their strategy chosen now, setups loaded. Hopefully no one's been deciding too late and missed the start, and I think we have a full grid of cars making it to the start line. Nobody in the pits this week, which is excellent to see. Shaka Zulu starting from the back of the field like he did at Mount Panorama last week. That one turned out okay as he climbed his way through the field all the way to P4 last week. So he will be hoping for something similar today. Obviously that was a race of survival. This could be just the same in these conditions. An old school circuit, Brands Hatch, no room for error, and it will be very, very challenging to do an hour of this without some kind of mistake. Drivers rolling round through the middle sector of the circuit now. Very little tyre warm-up needed in these conditions. The wet tyres take very little encouragement to get up to temperature. This very tight and twisty track, not a lot of straights. Overtaking opportunities will be limited without a mistake from the driver in front, but those mistakes I'm sure will come today. I expect we will see plenty of action. And it will all be starting very soon as they line up double file ready for the rolling start. And the spray not only making it tricky for the drivers tonight, but tricky to see what's going on further back in the field here as well. And that's before they're even up to speed. But here we go down to the start-finish line. Will Jazzman hold P1? Will Tinus get the launch in the Lamborghini? Will we see all 21 cars cleanly through the first couple of corners? As we cross the line, and that is the green light. Good start for Tinnis on the outside. He's alongside. Can he hold it round the outside? Just washes away off the line, and Jazzman will hold that one up into turn 2. But wide into turn 2, and they're side by side again. Jazzman still with the inside line. And that is all done. We have already some spinners at the back. Yep, into the wall. Joe Powell involved in that as well. We have Slicker as well, just slightly off the back of the pack. So did he get caught up in that, or did he just have to avoid it? But all as you were at the front of the field for the time being, incredibly close between Tinnis and Jazzman. Tinnis trying everything he could at the start there, but didn't quite work, as we do actually have a change for P3. Skov is past Rick. As we will not get a lot of good viewing from the cockpit cam with drivers without their windscreen wipers on today. I certainly hope he's not driving from the cockpit cam with those visibility conditions through the windscreen. I'd be very impressed if he was. As we have more chaos in the back of the field, Mr. Moosington is off. We have several cars down the order who have lost big time already. As we have a little look there from Bleeding Sunrise up the inside to turn 2, not really going for a move, simply trying to put off Scott in front of him in the Porsche. That Porsche v Porsche battle. That is another change of position. So Rick back past Skov, and I missed that one while I was watching the battle for P5 in the background, but Rick has got back into P3. I was not expecting this many changes of position early on. Must have been a slight moment, as we have an early pit stop for Slicker. We've also got Joe Powell in the pit lane, and I believe someone else in the pits. No, ignore me, that is my own car, which is not racing. But Jazzman pulling away at the front, built a 1 second gap already, using that clear air in front without the spray. Tinnis holding the fastest lap for now though, so Jazzman will not be escaping that quickly, as we have Bleeding Sunrise through past Scott. Looks to be a little bit of a gap in front of them, so I wonder if that was a late lunge and both lost a little bit of time. And we have more issues further back. That is Bonival and Matthew, and that is damage on that Lamborghini. As Joe Powell as well off the track. It is all going on early in this race. Very hard to keep up. Bonival back to the pit lane. Matthew trying to bring it round on track to lose as little time as possible, but that car heavily damaged and the steering out of line already. But looks like he will be able to bring that one back. Enough control over the car to get it back to the pit lane. But that will instantly put him over a lap behind. Let's jump back to some of the action of those that are still running in the front group. So Rob A P8 following Don Michaelo. very tricky braking zone into turn 1. The spray as well, getting rid of the visibility. What visibility there is with the blind apex. Very late to see the curb going through turn 1 here. Well, the car in front hardly visible at all as Don Michelo does hit the curb, and that is a very scruffy moment on the exit. Robbe will take full advantage up the inside into the left-hander up the hill, and that is move done. Don Michelo down to 8th. Robbe will look to chase down the 2 other Porsches in front of him and join that group. Don Michelo, though, throwing one back up the inside. Very unusual overtaking spot, especially in the wet, but that is aggressive driving round Brands Hatch, but he's got the job done. Don Michelo recovers P7 once again. And Robbe fighting hard to keep with him onto the grass, giving it everything. Really just battling the car around this circuit. As we have an early pit stop for Rick MotoGP from P3, P4. He was fighting Skov, but into the pits already. That will be damage. It has to be with the weather conditions changing mid-race. Any early stops will be costly, as you would expect them to have to stop again for the dry tyres later on. And just a little further back from the battle we were just watching, we've got Guido Christ chasing down Adam in the Ferrari. Not quite on the apex there, up the hill. And just dropping back a little bit on this lap so far. The gaps really changing very quickly. It's all about putting the entire lap together, no little mistakes. Keeping it clean and just slowly gaining on the car in front as they have their little moments. Outright pace not looking key today already, as the field spread is huge at this point already. The leaders going into turn 2 as we have the lower half of the top 10 only just crossing the line now. As Guido Christ, super optimistic on the brakes there, manages to keep it facing forward, may get away without losing a position. Dennis Van Eyck behind will gain big time and be right onto the back of Guido Christ, but well done from Guido Christ to keep that one out of the wall, keep it facing forwards, and he can concentrate on getting back into a rhythm to close down the gap in front of him. A very interesting battle for the final 2 yet to make a pit stop. Shaka Zulu slightly offline, poor exit out of the corner, Pren up the inside, and job done there for the Ferrari driver. So Rick has come back out from his stop. He is still the lead runner of those to have made a stop, but obviously anyone stopping early has had their issues. And already struggling to keep tabs on who's where in the pit stops, in the strategy with this race. We will see how it all pans out at the halfway distance. For now though, Jazzman cruising clear at the front. Even Tinnis struggling to keep up. In fact, Skov closer to Tinnis than Tinnis is to Jazzman at this point, so that Ferrari just racing away into the distance. And the gap for P4 has been moving around a little bit between that 1 and 2 second mark. Obviously driving the same car, these two, Bleeding Sunrise and Scott Fell, but different strengths around the circuit, maybe slightly different ways they've set up the car. One may have gone for a drier setup approach and the other focused it for the wet weather conditions. Who knows, or maybe it is just the strengths of the driver at different parts of the circuit, but Scott trying to put on the pressure to Bleeding Sunrise. And the gap just a second as they cross the start-finish line once again. As we have another battle brewing. The Lamborghini of McQuiz chasing down Devil's Armpit for P11. That's a disconnect for Jazzman. We've lost a driver and it is our race leader, so Jazzman with a disconnect from the race lead, and it looked comfortable, but that is going to have a massive impact on the championship now. We'll have to wait and find out if he can rejoin and get back into this race. But that is our race leader no longer with us, so Tinnis inherits the lead. There is the driver's eye view of the battle for P11 as it is now. Several cars visible up ahead for McQuiz. Just trying to keep it steady through this middle sector. Not pushing the limits too far as we have a recovering Dennis Van Eyck, and that was some small contact with Devil's Armpit. Nothing intentional there whatsoever, just trying to keep control of the car as he went across the grass on the inside. And Devil's Armpit just unfortunately in the wrong place at the wrong time. Another position for both Devil and McQuiz. And Dennis into the pits after that incident. Interesting line from Devil in front. The late apex can work with the exit onto the straight, but I think overall that is not the quickest way around that corner. And McQuiz just continues to follow, just over half a second back. Very different lines into the entrance of turn 1, whether that is McQuiz just looking to get out of the spray and get some visibility, or whether that is a difference in choice of lines down to turn 1, as the weather forecaster once again throwing up some interest here. So the rain will restart again in half an hour's time. So there is only a 10-minute spell where it dries up. Very unlikely in that case to get to the dry tyres at any point. But here we go with the battle. McQuiz almost side by side here, down the back straight. Devil's Armpit just has the inside line. McQuiz can't send one round the outside there. It would be an ambitious move, and settles in to wait for another opportunity. Very difficult, even in these wet conditions, the dirty air and the understeer, with that lack of downforce coming from the car in front. And we'll rejoin the front of the field where we now have a battle for the third position on the podium. Confirmation from Jazzman of the disconnect, and seriously unlucky there. Absolutely clear in front at the start of this race. But what can Scott do here, chasing down Bleeding Sunrise? We have Yip and Sharka both into the pit lane as well. I have not seen any incidents that could have caused damage. I'm obviously trying to follow everything at once. There may well have been something, but again, I would doubt if that is a scheduled stop for those two. As that is not quite the line for Scott through turn one, and that gap just opening up a little bit again, but very quickly things change around here. Bleeding Sunrise still under pressure, and that is a missed apex there. Just the little moments, the little time gains. I'm sure he's very conscious of the car behind in his mirrors, as we have Tinnis now almost 10 seconds clear at the front. McQuiz still following closely behind Devil's Armpit, just showing that it is difficult to complete that move without a mistake from the car in front. The opportunity has to present itself, and so far McQuiz still looking for that opening. As Yip has been in the pit lane for a very long time, so potentially a retirement there, or else heavy damage. Yip in the Mercedes, still in the pit lane, so that could be the next driver gone from this race. We'll keep an eye on the battle for P3 at the same time. The gap's changing corner by corner every lap, so very difficult to keep an eye on which battle is more likely to produce some kind of attempt of an overtake. Currently, Bleeding Sunrise and Scotfell going through the end of the first sector around just over half a second apart. At the moment, McQuiz similarly behind Devil's Armpit, and really pushing hard despite the conditions to the outside of the track and the curb there. Very easy to drop the car on the wet curbs in these conditions, but the lap time still needing to be found and the track limits needing to be pushed to find those extra couple of tenths to gain the time on the car in front to find that opportunity for the overtake. But McQuiz looking quite comfortable just to sit in behind for the time being. Strategy still yet to play a very key factor in this race, I would assume. I'm not sure how long that rain is stopping for, but we do have a period of maybe 10 to 15 minutes of dry conditions. The track will remain wet. I do not believe there will be any need for any drivers to run the dry tyres, but there will definitely be some overheating issues on the wet tyres if the track does dry up before the next rain arrives. But back to the battle for P3. These two very close together, and worth mentioning as well that the pair of them are gaining on Skov in the Lamborghini in second place, so this could very well turn into a 3-car battle for second. Little bit of the back end stepping out for Bleeding Sunrise out the final corner. It won't be quite enough to give Scott any opportunity into turn one, but the pressure well and truly on the 414 car here. And both drivers late on the brakes into turn two. Both pushing incredibly hard here in this battle, and Skov actually in P2 starting to rebuild the gap that was just starting to decrease. But Tinus in an absolutely comfortable lead now. Never say that it's completely safe, as we proved with Jazzman and the disconnect earlier, but you have to say, if nothing unexpected happens, Tinus is in the strong position to take the race win here and really put himself in a very strong position for the Drivers' Championship title. Battle developing on track. Guido Christ up behind Adam. I believe we did have a little bit of these two about to battle earlier before Guido Christ went deep into turn one. He has closed up the gap now and will be looking to keep it cleaner this time, keep it close and force the mistake from his competitor. Is the lapped car of Joe Powell behind. Joe Powell will have to be patient in this one as we switch across to Devil's Armpit and McQuiz, as McQuiz has found his way through. The gap was 0.02 of a second across the line at turn 1, so McQuiz getting the job done into turn 1. You would imagine that was a mistake coming out of the final corner from Devil's Armpit, and McQuiz's patience has paid off. He has the position, and now he will hope to show that he has the pace and pull away. Big gap in front of him up to Guido Christ. And Guido Christ continuing to see what he can do up against Adam in the Ferrari. As the rain has now stopped, just short of half distance in this race. And Shaka Zulu back into the pits. He has already completed his mandatory pit stop, so that is more issues for Shaka Zulu. Once again, didn't catch what has happened to him there. We are focusing very much on these few on-track battles, and once again we have the two Porsches right with each other coming through the middle sector. A lot of curb there for Scott, unsettling the car, but still able to keep it very close. Leading Sunrise through the penultimate corner, a little bit wide of the line, and the pressure is truly on here. Scott fainting to the inside. Leading Sunrise not falling to that one, keeps his apex, but the gap across the line just 0.2 of a second. Scott really just trying to make himself big in the mirrors, just ducking to the inside once again, and really all mind games there, no chance of any overtake into there from that far back. And another wide moment for Bleeding Sunrise. Scott thinks about it again, but they really are nose to tail. Just not the section of track where you can really throw a move unless you are really right alongside. Now we could expect pit stops at any point from these drivers. You would imagine that the wet tyres will be those that will be run for the entirety of the race, despite this period with the rain stopped. Whether an undercut would still be a thing, it's very tricky to know, but these drivers focusing for the time being on the battle. And once again, just slowly closing back up the Lamborghini in front, despite the proximity to each other, as we have Guido Christ off the track at turn 2. We also have car 87. That is Don Michello from P5 off the road. In fact, is still P5 as there is a huge gap from P4 to P6. So Don Michello, in a race of his own, has a moment but retains P5. But Guido Christ there has fallen off the track once again. He also keeps his position, remains P8, but has now fallen into the clutches of McQuiz as opposed to attacking Adam as he was a minute ago. Continue to watch Scott just looking for an opportunity. Leading Sunrise wide on the exit and just not quite a gap for Scott to fit his car into. But fantastic battling from these two so far. As Tinnis continues to pull further and further clear, we have Guido Christ off the road again. That is Devil's Armpit and McQuiz through. And we also have Yip stranded on the side of the road there as well, just as this battle we're watching comes through. So proving very tricky all round, plenty of cars off the track. We've seen some contact and we've seen some individual mistakes. We're still hoping that we might see some side-by-side action here. Incredibly close once again through the final twisty part of the middle sector, or the beginning of the third sector. But just unable to set up an exit to get alongside here. Porsche versus Porsche, so the car's strengths in the same places of the track. As that is maybe the opportunity, leading Sunrise wide, but Scott unable to carry the momentum as he has to get out of the power to avoid contact. Unfortunate with the way that that corner works. There is really one line and Scott unable to get any more steering lock without losing the back end of the car. That is a bit of a lucky break for Bleeding Sunrise. That was his first real mistake to give an opportunity, but still holds on to P3 at the moment. 25 minutes to go. The rain will be coming back in the next 10 minutes. The track has remained plenty wet enough as Scott thinks better of another overtaking opportunity. But the pressure definitely building here. I thought for a second that Bleeding Sunrise might be heading to the pits on that narrow line, but this is the first opportunity side by side into turn one. Scott has the inside line, and that is the move done. Can Bleeding Sunrise fight back? Scott to the inside to defend. And gets it slowed down, and that is a change for P3 in this race. Long time coming, that move, but immediately a mistake, and that is back to as you were. So all that hard work undone immediately. Scott Fell makes the move, but one corner later, wide, and Bleeding Sunrise back through. So we have Robbe in the pits, and I'm going to take a stab that this is our first scheduled pit stop. He will go back to the wet tyres. No need to throw on the dries despite this brief lull in the weather, as Rick MotoGP actually in P8 already, having completed his mandatory stop. It will be very interesting to see where that plays out. Did he pit early and take a risk that no one else did for that clear track? We will find out as the other pit stops come in, but let's rejoin this battle for P3. We thought it was done, but they're back as they were, and Scott will have to find another opportunity to make the move for a second time. But that's another mistake in the same corner. Manages to get it facing forward again. That is a back marker, the Mercedes. That is not a position loss, and immediately the Mercedes out the way quite extravagantly there onto the curb. Adam into the pit lane from P6. But time lost there for Scott Fell, and that battle we have been following for the last half an hour or so is no longer. Bleeding Sunrise now with a 5-second buffer. And Robbe back in the pit lane, so not sure. Oh no, not in the pit lane. He has had a spin at the last corner. So that's after the pit stop. And Adam out of the pit lane from his pit stop, but a drive-through penalty for speeding in the pit lane. And that will be a return trip to the pits in the next 3 laps. And that's going to cost him dearly in this race. In fact, still has a pit stop to serve as well, so can't have changed tyres in that stop and has sped into the pit lane. All round, that is not what he wanted from that pit stop. Someone who is not having any such issues at the moment, Tinus, just worth mentioning, he's still there. P1, 22 seconds the gap. He is cruising round at the front, probably taking no risks at this point. Obviously, the main competition for him in this race, and indeed in the championship, Jazzman, no longer in this one after the disconnect. And Tinus just looking to bring it cleanly home for the maximum points. So Rick MotoGP still the lead car, having made a stop. He is closing in on Pren in P6, who has yet to make a stop, but this is a battle for position on track. But ultimately, this is not a battle for Pren. We'll see what he decides to do in terms of continuing to drive his own race, or whether he deems it sensible to move out the way and not risk a collision. So the race all settling down quite a bit. Larger gaps further back as we have Matthew out of the final corner into the wall on the start-finish straight, and rejoining the track, but that will be bad news for his race. Gets out the way of Scott coming through in the Porsche. He's still looking to close the gap back down to Bleeding Sunrise. The gap has reduced by a second since that spin for Scott, so the pace looking good to potentially put the pressure back on at the end of the race, depending on the pit stop phases. But Matthew, who we are on board with, another race to forget really. Had a strong one last time out at Mount Panorama until the last couple of laps. And it was just one mistake that put him in the wall and cost him a P4 result in that one today. Tougher again from the beginning, and now will be nursing a damaged car home to the end or making a further pit stop. Don Michaelo in, and that is the car back off the jacks. Where will he rejoin? He has. Is that Devil's Armpit coming through? So that is over a lap down. He is comfortably P8, and we now have Skov into the pits as well. I think we are going to see quite a few drivers now making that mandatory pit stop. The weather obviously not a factor anymore. Wet tyres a guarantee. These tyres that have been running as the track has probably dried slightly will be a little bit overheated, maybe just suffering from a little bit more degradation. And the fresh set for the last 15 minutes. Scott pumping in the lap times. The gap to Bleeding Sunrise down to 3 seconds. So this battle for what is currently P2 on track, but a net P3 could be set to restart. As the raindrops start to fall here again at Brands Hatch. Just 15 minutes left to go in this race. We still have 5 drivers yet to complete a mandatory stop. Adam has been into the pit lane, but not successfully ticked off that box. And then our front 3, as well as McQuiz, yet to stop. And interestingly, Skov has come out 10 seconds behind Rick MotoGP. So Rick could be in a net P2 here. I didn't follow why he pit earlier in the race, or when he pit. I just assumed that those pitting early had done so due to damage to the car, but Rick MotoGP 10 seconds ahead of the man who was running in second for the majority of this race. So either that is a strong position for Rick, or it was a slow pit stop for Skov. We will have to find out when Bleeding Sunrise and Scott Fell make their pit stops. And Bleeding Sunrise pits right now, so we will find out very shortly. Bleeding Sunrise into the pits. Just on board too late to find out if he got that slowed up nicely in time. Into his pit box, and a key lap or two now for Scott, depending on when he decides to pit. Do we have any on-track battles to watch? I don't think we do at the moment. The gap from Slicker to Robbe, P10 to P11, just 2.5 seconds. Slicker involved in an early incident, didn't quite see the beginning of it, but Slicker having to make an early stop and looking to build his way back. And the answer to the question, is Rick MotoGP in a net P2, is yes. Bleeding Sunrise rejoins still behind Skov, so Rick MotoGP with a very, very clever strategy by the looks of it here. He did, of course, qualify P3. He was close with Skov on track early in this race. But that early pit stop seemingly working well for him, and the pace strong enough to bring him 10 seconds or 9.5 seconds clear of the Lamborghini now. As we have McQuiz now into the pit lane, and just the last couple of stops still to be made from these drivers. Scott, Tinnis, Adam leaving it late, looking to keep the clean air while they have it. Quiz will be hoping to rejoin at least in front of Slicker. That's Pren going through now. McQuiz still in his box. Slicker just coming down into the final corner. It may be close here for P9, as there is Slicker. And McQuiz rejoins just in front, so that will be a close battle to the end. Robbe has fallen behind, so somewhere Slicker made it past Robbe. And Robbe, there's the answer as to why. Robbe's Porsche looking like it has seen much better days. That is a very, very wounded car, and you can see from the pace that he's bringing it back there that that is a struggle even to get back to the pit lane. And that will be another visit to the pit lane for Look It's Rob 8. As we have Scott in from P2. Key battle with Skov and Bleeding Sunrise. We will jump on board with Skov, who is round the top part of the circuit. I believe Skov should comfortably hold on to that position. The bigger question will be, what is the gap between Scott and Bleeding Sunrise, or indeed who is in front? But actually this is not a big gap from Skov to Scott as he rejoins the track, and Bleeding Sunrise has lost out in the pit stops there as Scott Bell has rejoined the circuit just behind, but a lap behind, our race leader Tinnis in the house. And the gap from P3 to P4 is not too far either. The timetable's just set to update as we come across the first sector split, and just 3.5 seconds now that gap for the final podium position. So still plenty of intrigue for the last 7 minutes. About 5 laps of racing left in this one, maybe 6. We have a close, or potentially close battle for P3. We have the battle for P9 and P10 just 2 seconds apart. And Scott straight away on his outlap already making gains into the advantage that Skov has. It did look throughout that middle stint that Scott did have pace over Bleeding Sunrise, just couldn't get the move done. When he did, he made an immediate mistake that cost him the track position once again. But right now he is on the hunt and looking to get that 3rd place. Interestingly, Tinnis yet to pit is now coming up behind Skov, who will be under blue flag conditions. But Skov will be very reluctant to lift off for the leader, knowing that just a couple of seconds further back is a very quick Porsche looking to challenge for his position. And the gap down to 2 seconds already. Meanwhile, further back, McQuiz extending the gap to Slicker, so the battle for P9 doesn't look like it's going to happen. And there is the moment Skov releases Tinnis in the lead, and that will give Scott a very good view of the car in front, and Skov wide, and straight away the pressure is now on. There is still a few laps left in this race. Is there an opportunity for a move late on? Down into turn one, not close enough yet, but the pressure is truly on here. Skov can't afford to make any little error and give a moment's opportunity for the Porsche behind. As he is a little bit slow off turn 3, defends to the inside. But once again, that is a good run for Scott, just looking for that one moment, that one mistaken opportunity. As a big twitch off the curb. Really pushing hard here, trying to put the pressure on. Very difficult when close in behind another car to keep it precise, to keep it as close as possible, but off those slippery white lines. As Tinus, the race leader, peels away into the pit lane to make his mandatory stop. Just a couple of laps remaining in this race. The different lines up the hill. Scott closing in, but the Lamborghini getting a good enough exit there for Skov. But that is wide through the right-hander. Scott alongside, they are side by side. Scott runs it out to the edge of the track and nothing Skov can do there. That was the slight mistake just wide of the apex, and that is a change of position late on for P3. Tinus back out the pit lane and on his penultimate tour of the circuit, so these guys with just 2 laps to go. And Scott already extending that gap. The pace looking strong, just needs to now keep it on track. As we have Don Michelo rejoining after Sheen Curve, still facing in the right direction. Pren behind is almost a full sector behind, so that is not a problem for Don Michelo. He has a couple of moments off track, but remaining P6. We're still yet to see Adam complete his mandatory pit stop. This will be his final opportunity to do so. If not, there will surely be a penalty, and Adam does not come into the pit lane. And Tinus now on his final lap of the race. No pressure for Tinus whatsoever. Rick MotoGP in second place. Just about coming to the start-finish line now. Let's watch Tinus round his final lap. No risks needed, and it will be a fairly comfortable win in the end for this one. It was looking like a P2. We will never truly know what the outcome would have been had Jazzman remained in this race. But as it turned out, it's going to be a relatively comfortable victory for Tinnis. Just the final couple of corners to negotiate. And that is it. Tinnis across the line for his third victory of the season. 6 podiums out of 6. Adam there getting hit with the big penalty for not completing the mandatory stop. Rick MotoGP with an improvement from last week. P3 at Mount Panorama, P2 at Brands Hatch. What a race for Rick for the second week running. And Scott comes across the line, P3 with the late move. Skov brings it home, P4. Bleeding Sunrise lost out slightly in the pit stop phases at the end, comes through P5, and Don Michelo will be the final car on the lead lap. Obviously a short circuit, so plenty of cars finishing a lap down, plenty of incidents and spins across the way. But Don Michelo comes home P6, and that is the end of this race. 2/3 of the season done now, and Tinnis in a very, very strong championship position. But a tough race all round. Challenging conditions, the weather forecast just suggesting a chance of a tyre change mid-race to the dry compound. Didn't turn out to be that way, but would have been in the back of the minds for all of these guys. But in the end, another victory for Tinnis, another fantastic race for Rick MotoGP, and Scott fell battling all the way with Bleeding Sunrise, ended up in a late battle with Skov in the Lamborghini, and that move to take the final podium position. Of course, have to mention Jazzman, who you would think would have had a strong chance at the win, looking at the early pace difference between himself and Tinnis. But not how that one turned out for him today. So on that note, we will leave this race here. We stay in the UK for the next race. We are at Silverstone, and that will be another 60-minute race. So much of the same. Can't remember what the weather conditions and chance of weather is in that one, but I will see you next week for that one. Good night.